Welcome to Easter. Today is not the way we plan on celebrating Easter. Churches all over the world were planning on a great celebration because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Our church was planning a special big event because it's the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's supposed to be an exciting time where we all gather together physically in one room. But now we cannot do that. We cannot physically gathering, so we have to gather online through social media. But it should be a time where, like the old-fashioned days, where the churches would ring their bell and celebrating because it is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But we know it's best for us not to gather together because we still need to continue to keep our social distancing because we are afraid we might get the virus to someone, a loved one, and we need to protect the health workers, and we don't want to risk their life. We need to continue to pray for people because people are still suffering. But what will give us hope during this difficult time is the resurrection. So we still need to celebrate the resurrection because the resurrection means hope. It means hope. It gave hope to the disciples way back then. And it'll give hope to all of us because Jesus is alive. Before the resurrection, the followers of Jesus were experiencing pain, experiencing suffering, going through difficult times, just like we are today. And the resurrection helped them, comforted them, and gave them hope. And in Luke chapter 24, verse 13, we see about two disciples of Jesus. And behold, two of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs. And they talked together of all the things which they had experienced and what had happened in Jerusalem. And it came to pass while they communed together and reasoned, guess who showed up? It says Jesus drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. So here they were going back home to Emmaus, which was about 7 miles. So they experienced all what Jesus went through at the crucifixion. They saw Jesus being beaten. They saw Jesus being crucified. They saw as they placed a crown of thorns on Jesus. They saw the one that they loved being crucified, dying in front of them. Their beloved Messiah, where they had all their hope was in Jesus, and now he is dead. It was something that they never imagined would happen. They saw Jesus do miracles. And they said, surely Jesus is invincible. The Pharisees can't touch Jesus. The Romans can't touch Jesus. The Roman soldiers can't touch Jesus. Because Jesus is the one who raised people from the dead. Surely no one can do harm to Jesus. But it didn't happen. Jesus died on the cross. And I'm sure they were overcome with grief. They were overcome with grief. And I'm sure they were depressed as they were going home, experiencing sadness. In fact, Jesus says in verse 17, and he said unto them, what manner of communication are these that you have one to another as you walk and are sad? So they were sad, experiencing sorrow, just like we experience today through this difficult time we are facing. As we look back and experiencing all the sickness and people dying all around us, it's a time of sadness, a time of sadness. So Jesus says, why are ye sad? So they were filled with sorrow. They were overcome with grief, overcome with pain, overcome with all these things that they're experiencing, all these emotions. And not only them, it was the other disciples, Mary, Martha, and all the men They were experiencing great discouragement. It's kind of like we experience. We experience this now, we experience in the past, we experience time of grief, time of discouragement. Some of us have experienced grief over the loss of a loved one. We experience disappointment. Perhaps your plans, your dreams hasn't turned out the way you planned. You were disappointed in some areas of your life. Perhaps financially, you thought you'd be in a better place right now, but you're not in a better place. Maybe you are in a worse place. Or perhaps your family is fractured. It's not the way you thought it would turn out. Or perhaps you are divorced or on the verge of getting divorced, and you never imagined that when you said I do on your wedding day. Or perhaps you're experiencing health problems. You never would imagine what you experience today as far as certain sicknesses. And then you add the virus that's going on. It just compounds everything that we have faced. All the trials before and all the trials we're facing now. And we're just struggling. You're struggling with work. You're not sure we're going to have a job when you come back. And all this stuff can cause us to be depressed, can cause us to be full of stress. And it's hard to deal with that because we are blindsided. Just like the disciples, man, they were blindsided. They never, ever experienced or thought that Jesus, the Messiah, was going to be crucified. They didn't think that. In fact, Jesus told the disciples, I am going to the cross. I will be crucified and I will be buried, but then I'll rise from the dead. And they forgot about that. So they lost it all, and result, they are sad. And in John 20, it explains a little more what the disciples are doing after the crucifixion. It says, then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled, for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst and said unto them, peace be unto you. And that's kind of funny that they were hiding out. And Jesus goes up to them and say, hey, peace. Experience peace. They were not experiencing peace. They were experiencing opposite. They were afraid. When Jesus was taken by the soldiers in the garden, what did the disciples do? Did they stand up for Jesus? Did they say, Jesus, we're going to follow you all the way to the end? Jesus, we are going to be your disciples. We will not abandon you. We will even die for you, Jesus. We will die for you. They weren't doing that. They were hiding out. It says the door was shut. And I think it was locked. I think they probably had all kinds of locks because they were afraid the Pharisees were going to come in and take them and torture them and beat them. They were afraid of being persecuted by the Jews, by the Pharisees, so they were locked in this room. They didn't want to be beaten like Jesus. They didn't want to be tortured like Jesus. They did not want a crown of thorns placed on their head. They did not want to experience a crucifixion, so they were hiding out. They were afraid. And I wondered if they even thought that they could go back to their normal life. How can we go back to our normal life? Because we follow Jesus. We gave up so much to follow Jesus, and now he's dead. How can we go back and experience the life we used to have? And what are people going to say? I told you not to follow Jesus. I told you he wasn't Messiah. You didn't listen to me. And now he's dead. What are they going to do? Their life is turned upside down. They're facing troubles and trials, just like people today are facing. People's lives are upside down. It's not normal anymore. And people are wondering if we ever going to get back to normal. When are we going to get back to normal? Just like the disciples thought. And then you had Peter. Peter. What did Peter do? He was the one that stood up and said, Lord, I will never deny you, Lord. I will never deny you. I will follow you all the way to the end. And then what did Peter do? Peter denied the Lord. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And it wasn't a soldier that had a knife to his throat. It was 3 young girls. They just asked a few questions, and Peter wimped out, and Peter lied. Peter said, I'm not his disciple. So here's Peter, who said he's going to follow Jesus all the way to the end, and he denied the Lord. So the disciples were experiencing a lot of emotions. They were experiencing sorrow because Jesus is dead. They were experiencing guilt, shame, because they denied Jesus. And we all experience times like that. We experience guilt. We experience shame. We experience depression. There's times in our life we blow it. We make bad decisions. We make a mess out of our life. And there's times we actually sin. And we can easily beat ourselves up, blame ourselves, stay depressed. And even when we do something that's not our fault, we still put the blame on ourselves. And we can't forgive ourselves. We say we failed, it's over. Perhaps a failed marriage, a failed job, finances are in a mess. But as we said, there's good news. There's good news because this is Resurrection Sunday. This is Resurrection Sunday, and because it's Resurrection Sunday, we have hope. Even for today, even in the trials we face today, we still have hope because Jesus is alive. Because of the resurrection, we can have peace and joy and strength through our difficult time. Now, the question people still have, is everything going to be all right? I mean, if I surrender to Jesus, I follow Jesus, is everything going to be all right? No. You still have pain. We still will have times of sorrow, times of grief. We still will be discouraged. When this virus is gone, you're still going to face discouragement. You're still going to face trials. But because of the resurrection, because Jesus is alive, we can go to him. As we said last week, we can enter into his very presence, and he'll put his arm around us, and he will comfort us. Today, we have to stay 7 feet from people. But we don't have to stay 7 feet from Jesus, because Jesus did not have the virus. You can draw close into his presence, and he will be there, and he will comfort you. He will give you strength for whatever you need. So he's alive. Now, before the resurrection, they were running in fear, as we said. They were full of sorrow. They were full of shame. But you know what happened after the resurrection? Their life was transformed. Peter, before he denied Jesus, but remember at the sermon he preached at Pentecost, he preached to them and he told them, you guys killed Jesus. I mean, what boldness is that? What boldness? So they had boldness. They were no longer afraid. They were not afraid if they were persecuted. In fact, all of them were persecuted. And many of them were martyred because of their faith for Jesus Christ. And that can only happen because Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. So does that mean that they never experienced more sorrow and pain? No, obviously they didn't. So even after the resurrection, they still experience sorrow, pains, and failures. But they now know that Jesus is alive and they can go to him. They can go and lay their trials, their burdens, and experience forgiveness, experience strength from the Lord, because God is alive and he cares for them. If there's no resurrection, then they were not able to go to him. They were not able to receive strength. But because he's alive, we can now have encouragement even through difficult time we are facing now. Jesus is alive. He will help us today. He helped the disciples back then. He gave them strength, and he will give us strength. And those two that Jesus walked with, that Jesus said, why is your countenance sad? You know what happened? Once they realized that Jesus was with them, their eyes were open and said, yes, this is Jesus. He's alive. You know what they did? They ran back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples. And in fact, they told Jesus, it's getting late. Why don't you stay with us? But then Jesus vanished. And even though it was late, they didn't care. They're so full of joy and excitement that they ran back to tell the other disciples that the Lord is risen. The Lord is risen. So today we can rejoice. The Lord is risen, and he is with us during our trials. He hasn't abandoned us. He hasn't forsaken us, and we can go to him. In 1799, the armies of Napoleon were ready to attack this little town in Austria on Easter Sunday. And they could see the soldiers on the hill, and they could see their weapons glistening in the sunlight. And the town council got together and basically saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We are not strong enough to fight them. We are doomed. And after much discussion and discouragement, someone rose up and said, hey, it's Easter. This is Easter Sunday. We have been trying to figure this out by ourselves in our own strength. Let us turn to God. Let's ring the bells at the church and call everybody together. We're going to celebrate Easter. So everybody came out of their homes, and it was a celebration. They went into church. They're ringing the bells. And they started celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And you know what happened? The army that was ready to attack them, they heard the celebration. They heard the ring of the bells. And their conclusion was the Australian army was going to come, and in fact was there, and they were afraid. So the result is they left. They left. The army fled because they rang the Easter bells and they celebrated the resurrection. So today, it doesn't matter how dark it is, it doesn't matter how gloomy it is Easter. We can ring the bell. Jesus is alive. Ring the bell. Jesus is alive. Ring the bell. Jesus is alive, and he's going to help us through whatever we go through. Now we're going to have a special song.
The song I'm going to sing is called Red Letters. David Crowder wrote it, and it talks about how he was a criminal on death row, meaning that he was going to die and go to hell someday. But then he read the red letters of Christ, and the ground began to shake, and he became a free man that day.
In the first degree, Son of God hanging on a hill, how was my destiny? Crowd was shouting, crucified, could have come from these lips of mine. Dirty shame was killing me. It would take a miracle to set me free. Then I read the red letters, and the ground began to shake. The prison walls
Sunday. Tell someone, send this video to someone, and do a good deed. Show kindness to them, show love to them, and tell them that Jesus is alive. So that means there's hope. There's hope because he is alive. And let's continue to pray for one another, continue to help people, continue to encourage people, and we will meet again sometime. We're not sure exactly when, but we will meet again, and we'll be able to rejoice because Jesus is alive.